Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nik, it's our last episode before we break for the summer, and in what's becoming an annual tradition for us, for Trendline, we're going to go region by region and look at our federal House seat projections, which is always very exciting. Let's start on the West Coast in BC.
So check this out, Michael. So we're going to do our national roundup on where things are. As you know, we do seat projections every month, and obviously polling. And I wanted to share these maps because these maps really pop. So check this map out for British Columbia, and this is basically Vancouver Lower Mainland. On the left-hand side are the seat projections. On the right-hand side is the last election, and you can see if something is black, that means that our Nanos modeling cannot do a projection because it's within 2%. The margin is within 2%, a 2% margin of victory. Gray is like 2 to 7%. So what looks like massive swaths of Liberal ridings on the right-hand side, which is the last election. Do you see any red? There's no red on the map right now, Michael. All of those Liberal ridings are in play. And when you get into Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, we see black, which means it's less than 2%. The NDP look like they're going to be able to hold on to their ridings in British Columbia. You can also see the Conservatives holding on to ridings. But the key takeaway here in British Columbia, the Lower Mainland, BC, Vancouver, that the Liberals are on their heels and they're in a fight in some really tight races in British Columbia.
Nik, just a note for those listening to our podcast version. You can also check us out on ctvnews.ca and on YouTube, of course, to check out these amazing maps that Nik is showing us. What about the prairies?
Yeah, when we look at Alberta, for example, I want to do a zoom in on Edmonton. Like Alberta's pretty strong for the federal Conservatives, so they're a lock. But I thought Edmonton was quite interesting. We can see it in the last election. The New Democrats picked up a couple ridings. The Liberals had one riding. Right now, we have that one Liberal riding in Edmonton is too close to call, and one of the NDP ridings as too close to call too. So there could be a little bit of a change in Edmonton. Let's go to Winnipeg. So check out the map in Winnipeg. Winnipeg and Manitoba, still pretty good. You can see a lot of blue for the Conservatives. But when we're looking at Winnipeg proper, you can see there's one Conservative seat that might be in play. So not a lot of change in Winnipeg. So when we look at the prairies, think Edmonton with a little bit of change. Not a lot of change in Saskatchewan. Not a lot of change in Winnipeg. A couple ridings up for grabs. So solid state. Why don't we say steady as she goes almost in terms of the prairie provinces right now.
So again, in BC, a bit of a wild ride for the federal Liberals, at least. The prairies, no real surprises, I think it's safe to say. Now, Ontario, I think, is where things always get interesting, especially around the GTA.
For those folks that are in the red team, you're probably going to clutch your chest when you see this map. So on the right-hand side, you can see Toronto and the GTA. Looks pretty red. Look at the left-hand side. Ridings that are within 2%, that are black, ridings that are too close to call or toss-ups between 2 and 7% margin. Basically almost right across the board, everything is in play. The interesting thing is that when we're into downtown Toronto, it's in play between the New Democrats and the Liberals. And when we get into the burbs, the greater 905, it's a fight between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Also, Niagara, check out that region. The Conservatives, a little bit of a setback in Niagara, so that might be a bit of a pickup. And but those ridings that the Liberals had, like St. Catharines and stuff like that, definitely up for grabs. So right now, big battleground, Toronto and the 905 GTA is up for grabs. Both the New Democrats and the Conservatives are probably trying to prime themselves to pick up ridings at the expense of the Liberals.
How about Quebec? I mean, traditionally the Liberals have found that is more of a safe haven when things get a bit rough across the country.
Yeah, for the Quebec's the one positive piece of news for the federal Liberals. Not as much at risk when you're looking at it. You can see some ridings switching or that up for grabs, for example, that were block ridings that have gone from clear block to something that's up for grabs. But I don't think there's going to be as many changes. We also might see the NDP pick up a riding. You can see that little spot of orange just north of Montreal, where the NDP could pick up, have a bit of a pickup. But Quebec is very interesting because it's got those vote splits between the Bloc, the New Democrats, the Conservatives, and also the Liberals.
Nik, I'm curious about that little NDP uptick north of Montreal. I mean, we saw the late Jack Layton and his Orange Crush just sweeping across Quebec. Tom Mulcair did very well in Quebec as well, and Jagmeet Singh has kind of lost some of that support. He's had a lot more trouble in that province. So what sort of changed the game there, do you think?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any type of massive surge for the New Democrats currently in the province of Quebec, but a lot of this has to do with kind of local conditions and the vote split between the Bloc, the Liberals, and the New Democrats. I guess what we're putting on the table is that there could be a pickup for the New Democrats. Maybe just one riding, but you know what? If you're Jagmeet Singh and we're in a minority parliament, every riding counts. So Quebec will be one to watch, especially on the vote split front.
And finally, Atlantic Canada.
There's some really cool things going on in Atlantic Canada right now. When we look at New Brunswick, you can see Fredericton, which was a Liberal hold. Now we have tilting towards the Conservatives. The other thing is when we look at an island like when we look at PEI, you can see the last time it was a sweep for the Liberals. Now we have a couple of seats that are in play. Still the Liberals holding on or declared in one right now. Nova Scotia is going to be really interesting because when we look at Nova Scotia, there are a number of Liberal ridings that are actually have swung over. You can see in Cape Breton swinging over to the Conservatives, or are basically too close to call. So Nova Scotia is going to be pretty tough for the for the Liberals. And even in Newfoundland and Labrador, you can see parts of that province are now in play. It was kind of red rock. Now there's a little red speck you can see on the far tip of the island. But the key takeaway here in Atlantic Canada is usually a gimme most of the time for the Liberals. When Atlantic Canada starts tilting towards the Conservatives, it's bad news for the Liberals. That's usually indicative that the Conservatives are going to win a government. And right now, the Conservatives are picking up seats, but there's still a number of seats that are up for grabs in Atlantic Canada. It doesn't mean that the Liberals can't hold on to them, but it's going to be a super tough fight in Atlantic Canada between the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Nik, I feel like in this past season of Trendline, a constant theme has been how the Liberals have found a tough time getting traction with anything, with any major policy announcements, with the visit of Biden, and now taking up the headlines is David Johnston's recommendation that we go into public hearings, not a full public inquiry into allegations of foreign interference in our elections. Now, you've done some polling on that just came out, and how do Canadians feel about it?
Well, in the new survey that's just come out with CTV News and the Globe and Mail that we did, it's pretty interesting. So some interesting facts about this survey. David Johnston's been on the hot seat politically, basically taken it all on this. Criticisms related to his recommendations. What's interesting is he's got more credibility than Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre on this. So yeah, maybe he's getting a rough ride, but still, when people see David Johnston, the former Governor General, he's still politically taller in terms of credibility and trustworthiness compared to both Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. The other thing is that Canadians, at least at this point in time, clearly prefer an inquiry as opposed to the hearings. And the other thing that I thought was quite interesting, there's been talk about this foreign registry and what should the penalties be. Wow, Canadians want to throw the book, like criminal charges. We're not talking about fines. We're not talking about a slap on the wrist. We're not talking about, booting them out. We're talking about criminal charges is what people would prefer. The other thing, and this is the last point, Michael, that I'd like to make on the survey, we talked about these whistleblowers, right? And how Canadians felt about civil servants releasing documents in the public domain, security stuff. And there's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with that. So, we talk about the whistleblowers, and you know what? There is a role from a governor's perspective for that process. But when it comes to stuff like this, people are a little nervous about having that on some of these really sensitive security files.
I just want to touch on that fact about trustworthiness, Nik, which I find fascinating, because it was the Prime Minister's prerogative, obviously, to reject David Johnston's recommendation for public hearings. He did not. He's supporting Johnston, but the public actually feels sort of split on Trudeau and Poilievre over this, and they prefer Johnston. I still find that very
well. They're
interesting.
politicians, like let's face it. Stack up a politician against someone that's not a politician, and politicians will not do as well. But maybe this is a bit of a solace. And David Johnston's trust numbers on this issue were stronger than both Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre, but they weren't super high. So it's not like wow, type of situation. But I suppose that for the Liberals, it explains why they wanted David Johnston. He's not a politician. He's an inside outsider because he's a former governor general, and that he has credibility. And I think what the Liberals are probably hoping for is that credibility carries them through, or carries the public hearings that are going to take place, led by the former governor general. And I think for Pierre Poilievre, I think he's just going to keep taking a run at David Johnston to try to tear him down. So it's not going to be easy for David Johnston by any stretch of the imagination.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to look at our issue tracking.
Super.
So Nik, you are tracking the issues of concern for Canadians, and before we leave off for the summer, I'm curious where we stand.
Well, we know that jobs in the economy and healthcare are always top issues, but I wanted to do a spotlight on the environment. We've had these fires, fires in northern Quebec. There's a fire in Nova Scotia, fires in the West. It's like our country's on fire, So it's interesting. I wanted to take a look at the long-term trend line on the proportion of Canadians who identify environment as their top national issue of concern. So, Michael, check this out. You can see this massive surge, and that's just before the pandemic. And before the pandemic, I thought that in 2020, when we say January, for sure, February 2020, when environment was the top national issue of concern by like a country mile, and it was surging, I thought, hey, maybe 2020 is going to be our year to focus on the environment. And then the pandemic knocked that off. You can see the sharp drop in the first part of 2020 on the proportion of Canadians who identify the environment as an issue. But it's been up and down. But what you can see in the last couple of weeks is starting to climb up with these fires that are happening. And what we know, Michael, for sure, is that these events like the fires and also weather events drive people's worry about the environment. So how about this for a prediction? We're going to see, as long as these fires continue, especially since it affects air quality, right, in parts and right across the country, we're going to see the environment wrap up as one of the top issues this summer. And we're already starting to see the numbers start to rise. And you can see the last part of the trend line sharply increasing in the last couple of weeks.
What does that hold for the future of federal politics in this country? I mean, as the environment becomes a more and more of a critical issue going forward.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think what people are going to want to know are, okay, what are the positions of the different parties, right? Especially the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the New Democrats. And the Liberals and the New Democrats generally, and the Green Party, of course, are generally perceived as being very much in favor of fighting climate change and stuff like that. I think what they're going to want to hear also from Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives is kind of like, hey, what's your plan on climate change? What do you think about these fires? How does this impact, what your platform would be in the next election, and if you were prime minister, what you would do? So I would hazard to say that maybe this is a bit of a break for the Liberals, because they're going to get hammered on this foreign interference stuff. It doesn't matter how you cut it; it's going to be bad news, because it's just going to be a distraction. Maybe the fires will be an opportunity for the Liberals to say, yeah, this foreign interference stuff is going on and it will run its course, but they want to talk, or will want to talk, about the environment and try to compare and contrast the Liberals against the Conservatives. So how about this for a heads up? Pierre Poilievre, you're going to need to be ready to answer questions on your environmental strategy and what your views are on these fires, and what your plan is for Canada as an alternative to the Liberals, because Canadians are going to want to hear about that.
Nik, I think we'll leave it there for this episode. And once again, thank you to everyone listening and watching this show. Nik and I are taking a break over the summer, but we will see you again in the fall. Nik, thanks again.
Take it easy, Michael.